Prospect and Challenges of Blended Learning in Malaysia, Systematic Literature Review. So my name is Faiz Hilmi, with my co-author Yanti Mustafa. Will present the finding on this topic. So first of all, welcome to all the participants of the second International Conference on Management, Education, Social Sciences and Technology 2022. So we live in an increasingly complex world today, and new challenges and demand on teaching and learning method is a norm. So with the integration of technology, educators worldwide diversify their training and learning method. So by using blended learning, it facilitates student learning as well as ensure quality education and also produce active learners. So the objective of this study is to describe the evolution of a blended learning strategy in Malaysia by providing a current, critical as well as systematic overview of blended learning. So this study conduct a systematic literature review and extend our understanding of issues and concern related to blended learning adoption and implementation. And this study contributes to the methodology for conducting systematic literature review in the field of blended learning. So what is blended learning? As defined by Ministry of Education Malaysia, it is the integration of face-to-face and technology-mediated instructional approach, which typically provides students with some element of control over time, place, pace and style of learning. So blended learning offers more benefits and seems like more effective than traditional e-learning. And blended learning has become a major role in training and education scene worldwide. So it is the most suitable approach to implement e-learning according to previous research. So it is a current technology which is both dynamic and futuristic that catalyze innovation within the education system, specifically in Malaysia. So Ministry of Education has taken a proactive step and innovate the education system in line with the current technology. Furthermore, Ministry of Higher Education in Malaysia urged every university to introduce blended learning in their teaching and learning processes. So educators started to adopt blended learning in their lesson by combining both face-to-face as well as online learning. Method of this study. First of all, the aim of this study is to provide a panoramic overview of blended learning research. And how are we going to do that? Is by identifying trends and also patterns through a systematic review of related research. And by doing so, this study addressed the following research question. Number one, what are the theories or models related to blended learning? Number two, why is blended learning implemented in Malaysia? Number three, how is blended learning implemented in Malaysia? Number four, what are the lessons learned from the implementation of blended learning in Malaysia? And number five, what are the prospects and challenges of blended learning in Malaysia? So in order to answer the research question, this study searched the electronic databases, both Scopus and Web of Science, for related articles, using the keyword blended learning and Malaysia. All abstracts were screened for duplication and proceed with full text selection. Now, let's go to the findings and discussion. By focusing on each of the research question, let's look at the research question number 1. What are the theory and model underlying blended learning research and implementation? So based on systematic literature review, the following are the articles that provide theory or models underlying blended learning research and implementation. Number 1 is Unified Theory of Acceptance and Use of Technology. So the model is widely adopted in researching implementation and acceptance of technology. So it is used to determine the factor that influence the behavioral intention in the adoption of mobile technology in learning environment, according to one of the research. So based on the theory, 4 key constructs: performance expectancy, effort expectancy, social influence, as well as facilitating condition are the direct determinants of usage, intention and behavior. Next, we have social construction theory, which provide a dynamic view of learning. And blended learning is the most suitable approach to implement e-learning. The third theory is cognitive theory, which provide the guiding principle in preparing learning material for adult learners in a blended learning environment. So the detail is available in the full paper of this particular study. The fourth is transformational learning theory, which provide explanation for changes in meaning structure that evolve in 2 domains of learning. So the first domain is instrumental learning, which focuses on learning through task-oriented problem solving and determination of cause and effect relationship. The second domain is communicative learning, which is learning involved in understanding the meaning of other concerning values, ideal, feelings, moral decision, freedom, justice, labor, love, autonomy, commitment, as well as democracy. Next, we have activity theory, which provide a tool for understanding of conflict, friction, contradiction, and inconsistency, both within and between component of an activity system. Next, we have ADI, Analysis, Design, Development, Implementation and Evaluation Instruction Model. Provide a dynamic and flexible guideline for building effective training and performance support tools. After that, we have Knowles theory, which explain that adults learn in different way from children. Then we have Felder-Silverman model that stated that students learn in many ways, and it has become one of the most common model in implementation of blended learning. And then we also have student involvement theory that explain highly involved student devotes considerable energy to studying, spend much time on campus, participate actively in student organization, and interact frequently with faculty members and other students. So the next research question, why is blended learning implemented in Malaysia? It is an approach commonly used by open and distance learning higher education institution. So this method is promoted by the Malaysian government. Therefore, it is widely used. Okay, there are various reasons for implementing blended learning, from supporting face-to-face teaching approach up until to widen the access to educational opportunities and therefore enhance the quality of learning and reduce the cost of higher education. So the implementation is an effective learning strategy benefiting both educators as well as students. Next is the question on how is blended learning implemented in Malaysia. The implementation differs from one institution to another. Most higher learning institutions implemented e-learning either as blended learning or as an online learning services. So in general, Three components of enabler need to be considered in the implementation of blended learning, which is connection, content, and also confidence. So in Malaysian University, blended learning adoption consists of face-to-face tutorial, self-managed learning, as well as online learning. So in another institution, blended learning is added to the existing curriculum without reducing face-to-face contact hours. There are also simpler adoption of a blended learning in the form of online components supporting a new course textbook. Lesson learned from the implementation of blended learning in Malaysia. Student satisfaction and student learning outcome seems to be consistently high, and students express satisfaction with their learning experiences. They also reported to improve their communication skill and becoming more active in learning. They also give more opportunities for students to learn outside the classroom. It seems like the student commitment and engagement towards online content interaction also reported to be high. So, in contrast, there are also students who were not comfortable with online activities and preferred the traditional classes. Okay. Therefore, student acceptance towards blended learning differs based on their proficiencies level of the subject. There are students having difficulty adapting to the blended approach. They were anxious and appeared lost when explicit instruction were not given for online tasks. So the use of ICT in the calculation process distracted students who preferred face-to-face learning in understanding the calculation process. There are also several others that is explained in detail. And response and feedback from educator. Ease of access and usefulness influence the willingness of educators and the student to use blended learning web tool. And off-campus adult learner usually have minimal opportunities to attend conventional tutorial. Therefore, educators must conduct proper planning and consideration on any principle applied when creating blended learning program. Prospect and challenges of blended learning implementation in Malaysia. There should be a balance between traditional element and technology to ensure positive learning outcome. So, it is a challenge to produce a good blended course. So, in order to implement a blended learning in teaching and learning, there are various things that need to be addressed. For example, pedagogical aspect, learning style, activity that is appropriate for each of them. Teachers or lecturers should know how to assess and monitor the implementation and the success of blended learning. Sufficient technology support and infrastructure is needed in implementing blended learning, and the speed of internet connectivity strongly influences the success of blended learning adoption. There are also explanations on how to increase the effectiveness of blended learning, and also issues raised between the interaction between student and educators. In conclusion, the concept of blended learning is not always clear. So therefore, this study helped to improve the understanding. So we present theories and model related to blended learning and also the reason for blended learning implementation and adoption, how blended learning is implemented, lesson learned, as well as prospect and challenges of blended learning in Malaysia. So the implication of this study indicate how important proper planning is in implementing blended learning to help education institutions to successfully incorporate blended learning as part of their learning program. So for future and several aspects of this study should be explored further. For example, a large-scale survey to obtain feedback from both students and educators to explore blended learning implementation beyond Malaysia, and also to look at future adoption of blended learning, which should incorporate the theories and model that has been summarized in this study. With that, thank you very much.